Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Thursday, January the 2nd, 2025. So we had a major event in New Orleans in the early hours of January the 1st, where I think this truck deliberately crashed into a crowd, and I don't know, last time I looked 10 people had been killed. So I thought I would very quickly look at the horoscope of this event. It happened, I believe, at around 3:15 in the morning in New Orleans. So I thought, yeah, let's have a look at it, see if there was anything of note going on. But I also want to consider the chart of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, AOC. I have looked at her chart before, but she kept her seat after the, I suppose, the primaries last year in congressional primaries. I suppose once she's got through the primaries, she was home and dry. And I mean, I think she is interesting because she does have quite a strong chart, and at the same time, she has been in the news recently. She tried to become the ranking member of the House Oversight Committee, and she lost that vote in the House of Representatives, I suppose amongst Democrats, to someone who was 74 years old, who was recovering from cancer. And I think that a lot of people on the progressive left and the Democrats thought that was a really bad thing, that here was AOC, representative of a younger generation, who's sort of very alive and very clear about what she wants, and she was the kind of person who they should have made as a ranking member of the House Oversight Committee. But yeah, she lost this election, and so I thought it might be a good idea to have another look at her horoscope, because I do think that her horoscope does tell us something about Saturn and Neptune, or in a sense, how she responds to Saturn and Neptune is going to be very interesting, because I do think that things are going to change when Saturn and Neptune move into Aries in 2025 this year and next. So yes, I want to consider her chart. But before I look at the events in New Orleans and the horoscope of AOC, I want to consider the astrology and the I Ching for today, which is Thursday, January the 2nd, 2025. And usual reminder, if you enjoy this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. And if you're not subscribed, I would be super grateful if you were to subscribe. Anyway, let's look at what's happening today. Now, in terms of the aspects becoming exact over the course of the day, the major aspects becoming exact, there isn't really much going on. All we have is the moon making a trine to Jupiter. I mean, that is the dominant aspect. Moon in Aquarius, trine Jupiter in Gemini. I suppose you could say there's a kind of a grand trine with a true black moon Lilith at 11 Libra, but I don't know how important that's going to be. And so with moon trine Jupiter, I mean, it's a nice aspect. It's in air signs. It's a very reasonable aspect. I think it's quite an optimistic aspect. It's not too complicated. You know, it's not in water signs. It's not heavily emotional. And perhaps we can, be flexible. If something comes up which catches our attention, we can go for it. And so that's good. Now, as far as perhaps more minor aspects, the moon does sextile Chiron. I mean, it is a sextile. I don't see that aspect as being especially significant, but I suppose with moon sextile Chiron, moon in Aquarius sextile Chiron, there might be a feeling that we can do something to stand out. I mean, Chiron is a maverick. Moon in Aquarius sextile Chiron is about being independent. It's not a time to just do what everyone else says. We have our own view, and I don't think we should be afraid of expressing that view. And we might be afraid that we might cause upset, but I don't think we will, not really. Now, tomorrow, Friday, is of course when we get a fair amount of action, because we do get two important events astrologically tomorrow, which of course I'll be talking about in greater detail then. But we have to mention the fact that Venus is moving into Pisces. I already did a video on Venus moving into Pisces, so that is a big change, and so perhaps we need to get ready for that changeover. And also Mars opposition Pluto. So that Mars opposition Pluto is really close now. I mean, I know the exact Mars-Pluto aspect is tomorrow, but it's pretty much exact now. And so when we think about Mars opposition Pluto, we do think about struggle. And it is the struggle to make ourselves heard and to be taken seriously. And many of us may take the view that it's a conflict, but it is all about winners and losers with Mars opposition Pluto. And some people may be really, really desperate to be taken seriously. And so I suppose it's possible that we may not be impacted by this Mars-Pluto opposition directly, and it may be other people. So if we notice that other people are behaving in a slightly unusual way, that might be because of the Mars opposition Pluto. Mars opposition Pluto encouraging people to push things a little too far. And Mars opposition Pluto can be overkill. It's perhaps overreacting to what is perhaps a relatively trivial thing. I mean, I suppose one can think about the immune system with Mars opposition Pluto. The immune system overreacts. Perhaps at worst one goes into shock if one has an allergy to something. And I think perhaps one can think about allergies in terms of Mars opposition Pluto. I'm not saying that we're going to be allergic, especially allergic, with Mars opposition Pluto, but the allergy and the immune system might be metaphors for understanding this aspect. Something that is small, trivial, shouldn't be of any significance, kind of encourages us to go over the top, and that can have dramatic and perhaps very negative results. So don't discount that Mars opposition Pluto. And so that's pretty much it as far as the geocentric aspects. The moon is right in the middle of Aquarius. If you look at the chart from a perspective of Australia and New Zealand, you set it for Sydney, you find that the moon is that's actually January the 2nd, 2024, so that's no good. So I'm going to have to change that chart. So I'm going to change that to 2025, and we should see that the moon is in early Aquarius. There you go. So at noon, January the 2nd, 2025, moon is at 8 degrees Aquarius. So whether you're in Australia or America or New Zealand or Europe, the moon is going to be in Aquarius all day. I suppose if you are in Australia or New Zealand, that moon Jupiter trine it's still going to be very much there. I mean, in fact, it's perhaps going to take place sort of a bit later in the day in terms of when it's exact, but I don't really regard there as being a big difference. I think the moon sextile Chiron, which I talked about when looking at the chart from a perspective of New York, from Australia and New Zealand, I think that moon sextile Chiron, you're probably not going to feel it in Australia and New Zealand. I think that's going to be more about tomorrow. Turning to the heliocentric picture, and as far as the heliocentric positions are concerned, here we go. Here is the heliocentric view. And heliocentrically, we still have that Mars trine Saturn. I mean, in fact, I would have said today is a day of exactitude. So heliocentrically, Mars trine Saturn, and that might indicate, well, a certain sense that things are hard work, that everything has to be fought for. And I suppose that kind of ties in with the fact that geocentrically we've got Mars opposition Pluto. And we've also got Venus conjunct Uranus. There we are, Venus and Uranus conjunct. Now, they might seem to be over a degree apart, but we mustn't forget that Venus is a fast mover because it's a heliocentric chart. So with this Venus conjunct Uranus in terms of relationships, that might bring excitement. There might be things happening that perhaps we weren't expecting. Venus is also the planet of aesthetics, and so we might be able to sort of tune into the universe and come up with something new and interesting. That's Venus conjunct Uranus. Remembering that the heliocentric chart is more impersonal, but it's perhaps telling us, what is happening out there in the cosmos. And some of us, if we make the effort, can kind of pick up on it. So, that Venus conjunct Uranus, I think, does provide a certain amount of excitement. And, with the fact that there aren't many aspects taking place geocentrically, maybe we should put some focus on that Venus conjunct Uranus. It certainly brightens the day up, I would have said. Now, Mars is moving towards a square of Chiron. It's not there yet. It'll take a few more days before it's exact, but I suppose Mars square Chiron, it is starting to be a time when we might feel we have to be different. Or Mars square Chiron might be about being upset because we can see injustice, or we might feel that we have to take action to heal a wound. I suppose if you take the view that Chiron is the wounded healer. But there's a certain annoyance there, and even anger with Mars square Chiron about the various sort of injustices in the world. And finally, I suppose a reminder about Jupiter and Saturn. We've had that geocentric Jupiter-Saturn square on Christmas Eve, and we've got another Jupiter-Saturn square coming up in June the 15th, and that's the last Jupiter-Saturn square geocentrically. But of course, heliocentrically, we don't get retrograde motion. Things always go in the same direction. And so we can see that heliocentrically, Jupiter is slowly moving towards that square of Saturn. It will take its time, but I think that it's just a reminder that we are very much in a Jupiter-Saturn's stage, that people are beginning to feel the economy wherever you are. It was interesting that every year in the US, there are 2 days when you get a load of fireworks. You've got July the 4th, and then you've got New Year's Eve. But I don't know about you if you're in the Americas, but I sort of noticed that the firework noises was less than usual, and there was a blast of energy, blast of fireworks just before midnight, but it wasn't dramatic. And I'm wondering why that is. Is it perhaps because it's just been raining? It's sort of wet and damp. It's not, at least here it is. It's not exactly the kind of weather you want to be out and letting off fireworks. Or maybe it's got something to do with the economy or people's general attitude. I mean, even if they're not themselves feeling that they have less money, they kind of know that it's about to happen. And so there might be a sense of people being more cautious. I mean, just a theory. It may just be to do with local issues. So I don't know, but just something I did notice. Anyway, that's the heliocentric picture, and we mustn't forget about that Jupiter-Saturn square. So let's now look at the astrology for the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Thursday, January the 2nd, 2024. Aries. Aries, I think it's a fairly straightforward day, up to a point. I mean, the moon is trine Jupiter, and I mean, really try to focus on that moon trine Jupiter. I mean, it's a pleasant aspect, but allows things to move very easily, and it's quite sociable. And I suppose it's a new year, and I suppose maybe you want to be out and about, and if you are mixing with other people, I think that you'll feel that you've got lots to say, other people have got lots to say, and just do keep it simple. You don't want to make things heavier than they need to be, because there is that Mars Neptune opposition, which really can't be avoided. It's just there, and I think you are starting to feel it, but I don't think you need to be obsessed about it. And if you can just engage in light socializing, and if you can perhaps also think about 2025, about what you want, in terms of what are your hopes and wishes for 2025. It's not about material targets, wanting to make a particular amount of money, maybe wanting to achieve a particular job or improve your status. It's not about that. It's about thinking about things in a more long-term way, thinking about your broader future with the moon in Aquarius, trine Jupiter, and especially as it is at the beginning of the year. So, think about what you'd like to be achieving, say, in a year's time. In terms of your hopes, what would you hope to happen? And what kind of future would you envision for yourself? So, Aries, I think there is a case for really trying to be quite idealistic, and don't allow petty details to hold you back, and also give people a chance. I think that if you give people a chance, and if you allow people to just be themselves without making any comment or criticism, I think that would be very much appreciated. And it is a time, Aries, when you have a chance to perhaps meet new people or get closer to people who maybe you don't know very well, but you do have a chance to find perhaps sort of new connections with them, and just keep it light if you possibly can. Though I suppose one has to say that some Arians may find it very difficult to keep things light because of this opposition between Mars and between Mars and Pluto. And this Mars-Pluto aspect is pretty much exact. I think it's completely exact tomorrow. But with this Mars-Pluto opposition, if you start taking things seriously, then you're just going to take them more and more seriously. And you might end up becoming very intense and very focused. And I'm not convinced this is necessarily a good thing. I think that it doesn't really become you, does it? Because, Aries is the first sign of the zodiac. It's a very spontaneous sign, and it's an uncomplicated sign. And there's nothing wrong with being uncomplicated. You don't want to get wound up with power games, people trying to assert themselves, you trying to assert yourselves, people keeping things secret because they're afraid about what would happen if the world were to find out. You like to be open and upfront. And there's just some danger that the Mars-Pluto opposition encourages you into a way of being which is not typical of your sign and is not particularly helpful. So try not to take things too seriously, and don't feel that anyone is getting the advantage on you. I mean, over you. I mean, I suppose it is possible that someone is trying to take advantage of you. It's always possible. But I don't think you should necessarily assume a conflict or assume that you are fighting for supremacy or someone else is fighting for supremacy. There's got to be winners and losers. I don't think that would be constructive. Now, this Mars-Pluto opposition will continue into tomorrow, and I will have another look at it when I do your horoscope for Friday. Taurus, it's the beginning of the year, January the 2nd, and I think many Taurians are going to feel a sense that things have to happen. You want things to happen, and with a new year comes new opportunities. And these are opportunities you want to take advantage of, and you don't want to let time pass. So I would said on Thursday, January the 2nd, you should perhaps take the view that the New Year festivities are over, and now things are very much getting back to normal. And yes, you have things to do, and I think you can go about it in a very effective way, helped by the fact that there is a trine aspect between the Moon and Jupiter, and the Moon is in Aquarius, which, from your perspective, is a very ambitious sign. And then trine Jupiter. Jupiter is a planet that is obviously optimistic, but it's in Gemini. And Gemini is the sign after Taurus, and Gemini can be a sign that's associated with money and material things, and so this might say something about your ambitions, that you feel that you perhaps should be making more money, that you can make more money, that you can be better rewarded, and you want to get going on it. You want to prove yourself. So I think that is the right approach. I mean, after all, if you've got a moon trine Jupiter, you do want to take advantage of it. I mean, there's no point in having this trine between Moon and Jupiter and just doing nothing. And it does suggest, if you make the effort, the Moon and Jupiter will smile on you. It's a kind of aspect, Moon trine Jupiter, that if you're lazy about it, and I suppose Moon trine Jupiter can encourage laziness, if you're lazy about it and you just assume that wonderful things will happen all by themselves, well, nothing will happen. But if you just put in a little bit of work, then I think the trine between the Moon and Jupiter will reward you. I should also point out that Venus, your ruler, is on the verge of moving into Pisces. It's in the 29th degree of Aquarius, getting ready for that movement into Pisces. And with Venus being your ruler, that is an important change. And at the moment, I think you are relatively ambitious, and perhaps your ambition is perhaps related to what you can gain in a quite immediate way, and that includes recognition. And with the Moon moving into Pisces, with Venus moving into Pisces, it's going to be a time when things are going to be a little more relaxed, I think, because Venus is exalted in Pisces. But right now, you are in a sort of a changeover period, and because of this changeover period, I mean, I've already said that I think it is a time when Taurians do need to focus on their ambitions, if at all possible. But at the same time, you don't want to be too committed to any particular course of action, especially if it's something new. So if you get new information today, or you get something new turns up and there's a suggestion that you do something different, don't necessarily act on it, because I don't think that you have all the information, and you need to do some more research and you need to ask some more questions. Plus, the situation might change very quickly. So you might make a decision today based on incomplete information. And so if you are planning on making a decision, possibly you should wait until Friday when Venus has moved into Pisces. I think when Venus moves into Pisces, things will be clearer. Now, as far as relationships are concerned, Mars is getting very close to an opposition with Pluto. So because Mars is opposition Pluto, there is a possibility that some people do take themselves very, very seriously, including people who are close to you, people who you care about. And there is just an intensity to them which has been gathering strength over the last few days, maybe longer. I mean, we first had that Mars opposition Pluto around the time of the election in early November, so it's been this kind of ongoing aspect. But now it is exact again, and I think that it's a time, Taurus, when people do need to be taken seriously, and they want to be taken seriously, and perhaps you just have to accept that and not feel that you can change anyone's mind, or worse, try and push someone around. Yeah, if you try and push someone around, or you try to assert yourself on someone, then they might respond badly, especially if it's a one-to-one relationship. I think that's a situation where you have to be very careful, and it's possible that some people just don't want to be disturbed. They've got things set up their way, and they're not going to listen to anyone. And so, Taurus, I would just suggest that you just accept that particular situation. It's not going to last forever. But in terms of relationships, tread carefully. Gemini, there is a trine aspect between the Moon and Jupiter. In fact, that Moon trine Jupiter is really the only aspect there is today. The only exact aspect today. Okay, there's Moon sextile Chiron if you want to throw in minor planets, comets, whatever Chiron is. So that provides a little bit of extra variety. But fundamentally, Moon trine Jupiter is what today is all about. And Moon trine Jupiter, it's a great aspect for Geminis. You've already got Jupiter moving through your sign. And so Jupiter is a planet which is obviously the planet of good fortune, been moving through Gemini since the end of May, and now you've got the Moon making the trine. So that, in a way, is a good way to start the year. And the Moon trine Jupiter is encouraging you to just have a look around you and to just see what is possible. You might think you've got it all sorted out, that you've covered things from every point of view, but you haven't. And there are still things out there, Gemini, that you need to discover. And I don't think it's a time when you need to be asking lots of questions. I mean, too many questions could really spoil things. I think that you should try, if at all possible, to just accept things as they are. And if something looks good, then maybe it is good. Maybe you don't have to rip it apart, tear the stuffing out of it. I don't think that is necessary. And also, don't be afraid of your own vision. Geminis need a vision. I mean, if Geminis don't have a vision, they can sort of they can kind of I won't say fall apart, but if Geminis don't have a vision, they can just ask these questions about what is the point, and which Geminis can do. And you need something larger than yourself to give yourself a perspective. If you don't have that vision, then you can reduce everything to nothing. It's like, again, tearing the stuffing out of things. I mean, I suppose you think of a stuffed animal. You have, I don't know, people get concerned about a teddy bear, for example. It's a stuffed animal and it looks great. But I suppose if you want to reduce it, you can cut it up. But it's just, you find it's full of, I don't know, foam, pieces of foam, and it's got buttons where its eyes are, and you can just reduce it to this heap of scrap. And I mean, that's what Geminis can do. I mean, I'm not saying you necessarily with a teddy bear, but you can take anything in life and just reduce it to nothing. And that's something you should avoid. You should really try to see the larger picture and just not get obsessed with the contents. It can be difficult, but I think it's actually something that you very much can do. And maybe also you need some distraction. You need a sense of wonderment. Wonderment is another thing that is difficult for Geminis to find. But with moon trine Jupiter, maybe there's something you can find which really attracts your attention, which just makes you feel whole. But I did say at the beginning of this piece the beginning of this video, that potentially we have a grand trine in air signs, and we've got the moon in Aquarius, got Jupiter in Gemini, and then we've got true black moon Lilith in Libra. So the moon perhaps is making a trine to true black moon Lilith, and true black moon Lilith is making a trine to Jupiter. So how does that work? It's just possible that true black moon Lilith represents something from the past, something quite deep, something disturbing, but also attractive and appealing. And it may actually represent some answers, because it is all about being able to see the larger picture. And can we actually find a lasting picture if we're not prepared to go deeply into the roots of things? Because I suppose there's a danger that we just have a sense of excitement, a sense that we've found some new way of being, but it doesn't have the emotional foundations. And maybe with that true black moon Lilith, trine Jupiter, trine the moon, we can link up with past experiences which may be traumatic, may be unpleasant, but at least they're real. And they're real because they have feelings attached to them. And that's where reality comes in. And so perhaps what we have to do, Gemini, and of course I've got my sun in Gemini, we have to relate the excitement of the future with the intensity of the past, and kind of bring it all together and find some kind of wholeness. And once we've got that, we can start to live according to a vision which is real and is lasting and is not just something superficial and contrived. Cancer, we have the moon in Aquarius. Moon was in Aquarius yesterday, and with the moon in Aquarius, I think it's another day which is potentially quite serious. I mean, you are going to, I think, take yourself seriously, and I don't think you'll feel that there's much time for sort of mindless speculation, just getting carried away with the new year. It's it is more serious than that, and I suppose that the new year is just a calendar thing. It says nothing about really the quality of time in which we're living. And so with the moon in Moon in Aquarius, you are taking things seriously, and there are serious questions to ask. But the Moon is trine Jupiter, and that says something about you and what you can be. And I think that Moon trine Jupiter can be very optimistic, and you can look at things which might seem a little bit complicated. They're complicated, but at the same time you can reimagine them, and you can start to see possibilities. And these possibilities are not anything that you need to talk about. I mean, it may be something very private, but you're starting to feel that things are starting to work, that actually things can work if you just get given a chance. And perhaps what you don't want, Cancer, at the moment is to have people getting in your way. I mean, having a few people who you know, love and trust around, well, that's fine, but you don't want to be distracted, because as far as you're concerned, there is some serious work to do, and serious work, I mean, not necessarily the kind of work that just exhausts you, but just work on in terms of just trying to make sense of it all. And yes, the new year might be a calendar issue, but it still represents a marker of time. And I suppose now that it's 2025, you might feel that there are things you need to work out, perhaps before next week. I suppose next week, Monday, is sort of time when 2025 really starts, when everyone just completely has to get back to reality. And that's what you want to prepare yourself for. Now, the Moon makes a trine to Jupiter. It also makes a sextile to Chiron, and that sextile to Chiron could be about your need to do something differently. And it's not that you have to advertise it or do things which really stand out and force people to just stop what they're doing and ask themselves, what strange things is Cancer up to. It's not like that. But at the same time, you know that you don't see things in the same way as other people do with Moon sextile Chiron. And so perhaps you can start to think about next week, when everything gets back to normal, and also then think about how you might want to do things differently, because Chiron is the maverick, doesn't like to follow the crowd. And right now with the Moon in Aquarius, you're very independent minded. And okay, the Moon won't be in Aquarius next week, obviously, but with the Moon in Aquarius sextile Chiron, you can start thinking about what you want to do and realize that you just don't want to do it in the same old way, that you have to do something that is different, that makes you stand out as an individual. Moon sextile Chiron also might give you a certain healing ability, sort of more so than usual. So if you happen to be around people today who are under the weather, I suppose if you want to be literal about it, who've got some kind of wound, I mean, I'm thinking probably more of a psychological wound, you can do something to heal it. Of course, I'm not suggesting that you get involved in medical procedures unless you're licensed to do that kind of thing. But Moon sextile Chiron can be a healer, and it is about, because it's a sextile, it's about talent. So in some ways, Cancer, you do have a healing talent today. So maybe you'll get a chance to use it. Leo, you have at the moment quite a lot to say for yourself. I don't think you're going to want to keep quiet. And if something bothers you, you're going to want to talk about it. And I think that you're going to be able to communicate with a certain amount of passion, I would have said, and even a little bit of anger. So if something does bother you and you're angry about it, I think you're going to want to tell people about it. You're going to tell people about the way you feel. And so, Leo, perhaps that gives you a certain amount of responsibility. I mean, you don't want to just be angry for the sake of it. I mean, even if you're angry for a reason, there's a right way to express your anger and there's a wrong way. And there's just some danger, I suppose, that you talk too much, talk too aggressively. So do be careful what you say. But I think if you get the words right, you can be very effective. And I think that people are going to listen to you. And they're particularly going to listen to you because the moon is in Aquarius and it's trine Jupiter. So moon is in Aquarius. Aquarius is your opposite sign. I think with moon in Aquarius, you do have the capacity to listen to other people, to understand their needs. And with moon trine Jupiter, very, very sociable trine, that moon Jupiter connection, very sociable. So it really does allow you to really connect with other people in a way that is just easy, uncomplicated, and in the main quite straightforward, though I do go back to the fact that when you want to be, you can be quite angry on a verbal level. And I suppose the moon does make a trine to true black moon Lilith. And so perhaps with true black moon, that trine with true black moon Lilith, there may be certain things that you want to talk about that other people actually don't want to talk about. Perhaps they're too heavy, they're too deep. And so with that moon in Aquarius, you should be making a special effort to think about other people's needs and what other people can handle, and use your sensitivity. And then I think you'll have some understanding of what people can take, what their toleration levels are like. So, Leo, that's really the main theme of today, and just trying not to make things too heavy, too difficult. Yeah, especially with Mars opposition Pluto. We've already got Moon trine true black moon Lilith, and we've got Mars opposition Pluto. So with Mars at the beginning of your sign, opposition Pluto, as I said yesterday, there is a danger that you try too hard to look after your own interests in a way that is really unnecessary. And I think that with that Mars in Leo, you should be satisfied that you're in control, that you have power, and you shouldn't think that anyone is trying to undermine that power. And if you find yourself obsessing about another person, just consider the possibility that your perception of this other person is not necessarily real. It's actually very subjective, and you might have all sorts of fantasies about how much power they have, how much control they might have over your life. And it may not even be one person, it may be groups of people. I mean, it could just be the world at large. You might feel that it has too much control, but I think that is not necessarily a realistic assessment of the situation. I think actually with Mars and Leo, you do have enough control, and at the same time, with the moon in Aquarius, you're able to understand other people. You're prepared to be flexible enough to give people what they want, but without having to compromise anything. So I think today, just try to focus on that moon trine Jupiter. Moon trine Jupiter, it's a very nice, very sociable aspect. I think you can get on with people. I understand that you have got a lot to say, but ask yourself, is it really necessary to say everything that's on your mind? And just because you're annoyed about something doesn't mean that you have to talk about it. Maybe it will resolve in its own way without you actually having to do anything. Virgo. Virgo, the moon continues to move through Aquarius, and I think with the moon moving through Aquarius, you may feel that time is passing and that very soon things will need to be done, and you perhaps just want to just get on with it, and you don't want to be disturbed, and you're perhaps thinking about next week. Monday is what's Monday? Monday is that Monday the 6th? I think that's a 6, isn't it? Today's Wednesday. Wednesday, Monday the 6th. That's the beginning of it all, isn't it? It's when everyone gets back to normal. And I suppose you're thinking about Monday and you want to be properly prepared. And with Moon in Aquarius, I think that's something you can do, and you can do it in a way that is very focused and very independent-minded, and you don't necessarily need anyone else's help. Now, the Moon does make a trine with Jupiter. Moon trine Jupiter is the main aspect today. And so with this Moon trine Jupiter, I think that you can gain real satisfaction in terms of whatever you've set yourself to do. So if you're doing something that on the surface seems rather boring, it's just something you have to do, then okay, to begin with it might be boring, but soon enough you'll feel a certain sense of satisfaction that you're actually going in the right place. And yes, it is a great time for preparation, and if you do work which is very detailed, then I think that you'll be very pleased with the results. And yeah, it's something you can do which in the end is going to get recognition. Now, you may not get recognition immediately, but over the next week you are really preparing yourself, and I think you can prepare yourself extremely well. And just don't allow irrelevant concerns to bother you, and don't necessarily analyze other people too much, and don't analyze other people's motives too much. I think if you spend too much time analyzing people's motives, then you might come to the wrong conclusion, and that might be because the moon is making a trine to Jupiter, but the moon is also making a trine to true black moon Lilith, and that true black moon Lilith does represent things which are perhaps a little unpleasant, and it may occur to you that perhaps when it comes to money, for example, that people are motivated by material concerns, and that's all that matters. And there can be something quite unpleasant about that if you start to think that people are only motivated by money. But maybe they are, maybe they aren't. And consider the possibility that you yourself might be motivated by money. And when you look at yourself and your attitude to money, and you look at it really deeply, you might feel that you shouldn't be motivated by money. That it's something there's almost perhaps something wrong that if money is such a motivator. But money does matter, and perhaps that trine between the moon and true black moon Lilith is a reminder there. And I suppose you could also say, if the moon is trine true black moon Lilith and the moon is also trine Jupiter, I mean, you kind of think of that phrase, where there's brass, where things are unpleasant, that's where the money lies. And it could be, Virgo, looking at this in a very positive way, that your capacity to do things which other people don't want to do, perhaps because they seem sordid or beneath them, but your ability to just do it in a no-nonsense kind of way can actually give you a distinct advantage. Libra. Libra, we have a trine between the Moon and Jupiter, and this trine between the Moon and Jupiter, I would have said, is pretty fortunate. And this trine certainly lights up your own sign because the moon is in Aquarius. It kind of makes a trine to Libra in general. Jupiter is in Gemini. It makes a trine again. It makes a trine to Libra. So there's a sort of grand trine formation hitting your sign, and so in general, it does seem, Libra, that things really are flowing really very nicely, and you may feel sort of more optimistic than usual, and also you may have a great sense of what you can do. Sometimes you have your doubts, but not today. I think if you actually look at what you're able to do, you'll realize that it's really very special, and that you have unique abilities. And I think that the Moon Jupiter trine is going to really help you to get these abilities out into the open. Though it's important that you're realistic and that you don't throw your energies into the wrong area. I think that is somewhat possible. I think that perhaps you'll get interested in something which just isn't for you. It doesn't suit you, but you might just be curious. And so there could be a certain danger of being sidetracked. And I suppose you could be sidetracked by other people making suggestions which don't really fit in with your plans. They don't fit in with you, but maybe just you want to be polite and you just follow people's suggestions, and that just gets you absolutely nowhere. And I suppose that's a reminder that Moon trine Jupiter, it's a good aspect, but trines can be a little bit lazy. They can just want to go with the flow, and you don't want to just go with the flow. You have things you want to do, and you have to think about yourself and what you're good at. And the Moon trine Jupiter should encourage you to make the most of what you have, and it shouldn't encourage you to try something which is completely different, so different that it has absolutely no relationship to who you are, what your destiny is, and your future. So yes, you could waste time today. That really is possible. And the moon doesn't just make a trine to Jupiter, it does actually make a trine to true black moon Lilith. So true black moon Lilith has been moving through your sign recently, and true black moon Lilith perhaps has a rather difficult reputation, but this true black moon Lilith is real, and it may represent your own awareness that things are not entirely pleasant. You have your own unpleasantness. We all have our own unpleasantness, and other people can be unpleasant, and there are things going on in society which are unpleasant. And I think that with this moon trine Jupiter trine the true black moon Lilith, I think if you're honest with yourself, you are aware of that unpleasantness. And the question is, what do you do with it? And I suppose, going back to what I was saying about getting distracted, you may get distracted by things which are unpleasant but have nothing to do with you. But then, on the other hand, there may be things which are unpleasant, which are completely connected with you, which are completely connected with who you are. And it may be that the secret of growth and development is actually linking up with a side to your personality which isn't always very nice, and being absolutely honest about who you are. Sure, it relates to the past and you want to move on from the past, but at the same time the past is necessary in order to deal with the present and to move into the future. So it might be a good idea, if you were to look at the past and look at past experiences, past feelings, and see what relevance they have. Maybe you'll recognize that some things from the past have been holding you back, and perhaps with this moon trine Jupiter, trine true black moon Lilith, you can link with the past and overcome particular obstacles. And these obstacles, I think in the main, are probably going to be psychological obstacles, and perhaps you'll take the view that now it's a new year, you have a chance to get over them. But you can't get over an obstacle by ignoring it, not the kind of obstacle that is represented by true black moon Lilith. Scorpio, in some ways you probably don't want to do anything today, or at least you don't want to go on wild adventures. You may just ask yourself, well, what is the point? And at the same time, you value your own security, and why take risks? What is the benefit? Now, it may be that you're being pressurized to do something you really don't want to do, and in that case, I would suggest that you hold firm, that you stick to what you believe in, you stick to your existing plans, and you don't allow yourself to be distracted. Yet the moon is making a trine to Jupiter. This trine between moon and Jupiter, it's not usually a particularly important aspect, but it is actually the main aspect happening today. It's the main geocentric aspect which becomes exact today, so I think it does take on an importance that perhaps it usually doesn't have. And with this moon trine Jupiter, it is a good aspect, but I do think that this aspect is about taking yourself seriously and realizing what is possible. And if you really look at what is available and you consider your own power and your power to transform, then I think with this moon trine Jupiter, you can really see new possibilities which are completely in line with who you are. And the moon doesn't just trine Jupiter, it does make a trine to true black moon Lilith. Okay, it's not absolutely exact, but we do have this kind of grand trine involving moon, true black moon Lilith, and Jupiter. And true black moon Lilith in Libra, it's a part of your chart which is quite hidden, and it may be, Scorpio, with this grand trine, that there is some part of yourself represented by true black moon Lilith which you've in some way disregarded, and you've regarded it as maybe something from the past, something you really don't want to deal with, and you just want to sort of section it off. But you have to be a whole person, and you have to accept everything. And there are some things which are quite secret, perhaps represented by true black moon Lilith, that you maybe need to start sort of integrating into your life. And I think that with this moon trine Jupiter, trine true black moon Lilith, you maybe do have a chance to integrate things which at first sight seem a little bit unpleasant, but on closer inspection are actually a fundamental part of who you are. So Scorpio, don't be afraid of yourself. Don't be afraid of the various components of who you are, and you can't section things off. You can't split the past from the present, because the past does matter. And maybe this is what you can do with Moon Trine True Black Moon Lilith. It allows you to integrate something, and you can do it in your own private way. And perhaps that's another reason why you don't want to be particularly connected with other people right now, because other people but just might seem to be a distraction when you've kind of got this work to do on your own, in your own way. And talking about things that are a little bit intense and heavy, there is this Mars opposition Pluto happening. And Mars opposition Pluto, yeah, it's exact tomorrow, but it's pretty exact now. I mean, Mars is at 121 Leo, Pluto is at 17 Aquarius, so Mars is only 14 minutes away from the Mars-Pluto opposition. And so with this Mars-Pluto opposition, yeah, you're taking yourself seriously, and there are things you want, and you may not be completely open about what you want, but your desires are very real, and at the same time you're very aware of perhaps what is preventing you getting what you want. And you have to be careful there, because you have to ask yourself, are you being blocked by real people? Maybe your family, maybe you feel your family are not fully sympathetic to your needs, or perhaps the way your domestic environment is set up. Are you being blocked by real people, or are you being blocked perhaps by figments of your imagination, or by figments from the past? And I suppose that goes back to what I was saying about True Black Moon Lilith, how you have to be as integrated as possible. A final word about relationships. Venus is very connected with relationships in a Scorpio chart, because obviously Venus rules Taurus, and Venus is in the process of changing signs. So tomorrow Venus goes into Pisces, and so if we look at that sign change and we see it as something symbolic, it may be that some of the people around you, close to you, are in the process of a change. They're not quite sure which way they're going. They're not ready to make decisions. And today would be a bad time to push anyone to make a decision. And if someone seems indecisive, well, that's obvious. It's because Venus is about to change sign. And I think you'll find that tomorrow, when Venus moves into Pisces, you'll find that certain relationships are going to be more straightforward. But I'll talk about Venus in Pisces in greater detail when I look at your horoscope for tomorrow, which is Friday. Sagittarius. Sagittarius, don't allow yourself to be deluded, and don't take things at face value. And that is especially the case when dealing with other people. Other people can be deceptive. I mean, it's not that they're being deliberately deceptive necessarily, but people just aren't being clear about who they are and what they want. And so it would be a bad idea to make assumptions. Just take people as they are. Don't feel you have to know. Instead, you can observe, you can gather information, but probably it's a bad idea to actually be making absolute decisions about people, because it's just going to be difficult, and it's going to be very difficult to understand their motivations. Now that's one side to what's happening today. Another side to what's happening today is the fact that the moon is making a trine to Jupiter. Jupiter is, of course, your ruler. And I think that with this moon trine Jupiter, which is a fortunate aspect, and geocentrically, really it's the only aspect happening today. So it does take on a significance that perhaps it doesn't usually have. And with this moon trine Jupiter, I think that you will be able to express yourself very well, and you're not going to be particularly subtle about it. I think you're just going to want to just say it as it is in your own particular Aquarian way. And I think that your honesty with a streak of independence is probably going to go down pretty well. And I think that people will understand that you are straightforward, but you also have something about you that is quite exciting, and you're just able to look at things in a different way, and also give people an alternative. Yeah, that's what you can provide. But you mustn't forget that Jupiter is in Gemini, so Jupiter is in your opposite sign. So, and of course it's been there since the end of May. So, it is a time when you do have to consider other people, understand other people's weaknesses. And so with this moon trine Jupiter, you're trying to elucidate things, you're trying to make things clear, and you're also trying to say things which don't cause offence. And I think that is something very much that you actually can do. And so you can come up with the right words, the right way of explaining things. So perhaps if you've been trying to say something, something over the last few days, and the words haven't come out right in the past, I think that now with the moon trine Jupiter, I think you're going to be able to explain yourself extremely well, and I think that people will understand. And I think that in most cases, you're likely to get your way, because I don't think you're going to cause offence. I mean, I know that there is Mars opposition Pluto tomorrow is exact. I mean, I suppose everyone has to be somewhat aware of that Mars opposition Pluto, and I suppose in terms of communication, it can make things somewhat complicated. So going back to the way you communicate and your communication skills, is just important perhaps that you're aware that Mars is that Mars is opposition Pluto, and with that awareness you can make sure that you do keep things simple, and that you just make an allowance for other people's particular way of seeing the world. Yeah, you can upset people's balance a little. You can be slightly controversial, but if you're too controversial with that Mars opposition Pluto, there's going to be trouble, because it may reach a point where people just become very defensive. And so be aware of that capacity for defensiveness as you go about your business today, whatever you're planning on doing today. Of course, it may be that you don't want to talk to anyone, and I suppose that would make things simple, and I think it would be a missed opportunity, though. I think because if something needs to be said and you want to say it in a way that is simple and doesn't cause offence, then now might be the time to do it. And really, that's pretty much all that needs to be said. I suppose communication is a two-way flow, and it's not just about what you're saying, it's what other people are communicating as well. And other people have their own visions. It's easy to forget that, because all of us were so centered on our individual universes that it sometimes doesn't occur to us that other people have ideas, other people have aspirations. But actually, some people have very powerful aspirations at the moment. People close to you, people who you are in touch with perhaps every day, they have hopes for the future. And perhaps you need to make some effort to understand what their hopes for the future actually are and what their real vision is. So give people that opportunity, and you might be surprised. And I think it will also be very much appreciated if you give people the time to talk about their hopes and about their vision. Capricorn. Capricorn, it's a day when we have a trine between the moon and Jupiter. And this trine between moon and Jupiter may have an impact on relationships. A fortunate impact, because the moon can be representative of another person, perhaps someone who is important to you. And with that moon trine Jupiter, it does give people a lift. I think that some people are going to be perhaps more optimistic than usual with that moon trine Jupiter, and you just may notice that some of the important people in your life are becoming sort of more positive and sort of more with it, and they're better able to express themselves, be themselves, and so do make use of that moon trine Jupiter. I'm not saying that moon trine Jupiter is a dramatic aspect. It's actually quite a stabilizing aspect. But I think, if there have been recent difficulties, at least if other people have been having recent difficulties, it may feel that they can see the light at the end of the tunnel with moon trine Jupiter. So there could be an atmosphere of greater optimism. Now, that moon trine Jupiter could also have financial implications. So I don't know what's going on with money in your life. Obviously, I don't know. But do think about money. Even if you think that money is completely irrelevant, is not part of your life, that moon trine Jupiter does give financial opportunity to you. So if you want to do something with money, if you want to look at financial possibilities, then moon trine Jupiter really could give it to you and could open up new opportunities. So that's something that I think that you can benefit from. The moon doesn't just trine Jupiter; it actually makes a makes a sextile to Chiron. So moon sextile Chiron, I mean, it's a fortunate aspect, and moon sextile Chiron may give you the opportunity to ground things, perhaps in a financial sense. Perhaps people are talking about money, or perhaps you're thinking about money, and you can perhaps ground things, although maybe in a rather unusual way, because it's all very well to talk about money, but what about giving it some grounding and stability, making it actually real? And I think perhaps with moon sextile Chiron, that is something you can do, but in the process, some assumptions may have to be shaken up, and that might be how best to deal with the moon trine Jupiter aspect. Yes, there are financial opportunities here, I think, but just because there are financial opportunities doesn't actually mean that anything's going to happen. But if you can sort of ground things in a rather unusual and idiosyncratic way, then I think that might be actually quite a good thing to do. And also, there is this grand trine in air signs. I've talked about moon and Jupiter. The other part of a trine is true black moon Lilith. So you got moon trine true black moon Lilith, and Jupiter is trine true black moon Lilith. So the moon is picking up on the Jupiter black moon Lilith trine, and it indicates that there are opportunities here, but these opportunities might be unexpected and might be somewhat uncomfortable. So there could be opportunities of a financial nature. But in order to take advantage of those opportunities, you might have to explore something that maybe you don't want to explore, or even talk to people you don't want to talk to. So people who might seem rather unpleasant might be people who have something to offer. And so, don't take things at face value. And I understand that right now, Capricorn, security is important, but don't be too secure. Don't be so secure, so obsessed with security that you actually limit your options. I mean, it's a situation where something is available, but you may actually feel that you have to almost take a risk in order to get hold of it. I don't think it's a sort of a real risk, but it's more of an emotional risk, because you're having to do something that you don't want to do, that you feel uncomfortable with, that you may even fear. And the reason you might fear it is because perhaps of past experiences. When I talk about past experiences, maybe going back sort of decades, but being able to sort of unlock the past does give you opportunities in the future. Aquarius, the main aspect today is probably a trine aspect between the moon and Jupiter. So the moon is in Aquarius, the moon is in your sign, and with the moon in your sign, I think that you're feeling quite confident, you're feeling quite self-contained, and in general, I think you feel pretty comfortable. And with the moon making a trine to Jupiter, that feeling of confidence, I think, is enhanced, and you possibly have a sense of what you can do and what is actually possible. It's great to have that feeling as we go into the new year. I mean, you're thinking about 2025, all the things that you can do over the course of the year, and you have this moon trine Jupiter, and you're thinking, well, what can you do with it? Well, there is always a danger when you've got moon trine Jupiter that it gets wasted. I mean, Jupiter can encourage complacency. You just feel everything's fine, everything's going smoothly, nothing has to be done, and the opportunity could just go nowhere. So with this moon trine Jupiter, it's important that you work on it. With Jupiter aspects, they need work. If you just leave them to their own devices, nothing much happens in most cases. You can't expect to be given things on a silver plate, even when moon is trine Jupiter. So with moon trine Jupiter, do make the most of things, make the most of who you are, and try to have an active day. I mean, I know that it's all a bit slow. New Year, yesterday was January the 1st, but moon trine Jupiter does give you a good opportunity to really set yourself up nicely for the new year. And I suppose Monday, January the 6th, that's, I suppose, when everything is over, when the celebrations are over, when everything gets back to normal. And so what you can create and set up now with this moon trine Jupiter could actually be very useful. But you've got to believe in yourself, and you shouldn't slack off. That I think is really important. And also the moon does make a sextile to Chiron. And with this sextile to Chiron, it maybe emphasizes the fact that Aquarius is a very independent-minded sign. Because if we take the view that Chiron is the maverick, Chiron likes to do things differently and is quite independent. So moon sextile Chiron further emphasizes the fact that you have got particular talents. That's what Chiron is about, isn't it? I mean, Chiron is a healer, but Chiron heals using I don't know, different things. I suppose Chiron understands herbal law, has sort of different sort of potions and salves, and knows how to use the natural environment. And so if one applies that to you, it's, what is in your toolbox? What are all the tricks you've got? What are all these things that you've maybe been keeping to yourself, but you've got things which you can use, and you can use them, I suppose, to help yourself, but you can also use them to help humanity. I mean, you can't help all of humanity on a quiet Thursday, but you can help some of the people around you, and you've got ideas. And so Aquarius, do make the most of your ideas, and don't think that people aren't interested, because at the moment, Aquarius, you're able to be someone who gets noticed. I think people are going to like you, and that is because in some way you're in harmony with the times. At least you're in harmony with Thursday, and so people are attracted to you, and they're interested in what you've got to offer. And I do think, Aquarius, that today you actually have just quite a lot to offer, though finally I have to say that Mars is getting very close to an opposition to Pluto. I mean, that Mars-Pluto opposition is exact tomorrow. And so that the opposition, it affects you, because Pluto's in Aquarius, Mars is in Leo, and it could affect you, and it could also affect the people close to you. So in close relationships, you may find that some people are very set in their ways, and they don't want to be told. And this might bother you. But should it bother you? I think if people are completely focused on themselves, if they want to do things in a particular way, I would suggest that you just let them get on with it. And this doesn't take away from the fact that you are someone who can be popular. Yeah, as I said, people like you. You are in accord with the times in general. It just may be that the people who are really close to you, there may be a slightly different situation. There may be a different situation there. You just may notice that they are perhaps too wrapped up in themselves. I mean, too wrapped up. I mean, that's the way they are. And I suppose this Mars-Pluto opposition is just going to get closer. And tomorrow, which is Friday, that Mars-Pluto opposition is exact. And when I do your reading for tomorrow, I'll go into that aspect in more detail. Pisces, it's another day when I don't think that you necessarily want to have a particularly high profile. I think that if you're out and about with people, meeting people, I'm not convinced that you're going to feel especially comfortable. And at the same time, you've got to consider your own judgment. Your judgment of other people is not going to be 100%. I think maybe because you might be a little bit too idealistic. You expect the best, you hope for the best, you think that people will treat you well if you treat them well, but not necessarily the case. I mean, it's possible that you might make some false assumptions about certain people. You may think they are one thing, think you may have assumptions about their feelings, but those assumptions may just be wrong. It happens. I mean, and it's just something very passing. And so that is perhaps a good reason why you should be somewhat wary of other people. Particularly if you don't know them well, or there have been recent complications. I would have said, you should hold back. And I must emphasize, it is a temporary situation, and Venus is about to move into Pisces, and that's going to have a big impact on relationships. And tomorrow I'll be talking about Venus in Pisces and how it impacts you. But that is really great, Venus moving into Pisces. But today, Thursday, Venus is not in Pisces. In fact, when does Venus move into Pisces? If you want an exact... it moves into Pisces tomorrow at, 3:24 London time. So I suppose if you are in the Americas this evening, you might feel Venus moving into Pisces. Venus moving into Pisces could actually bring a certain change in terms of relationships this evening. Things are just suddenly going to become a lot easier, and people are going to be sort of less aloof. I mean, I don't know what you're doing this evening, but there is that change. But if you're in Europe, Australia, New Zealand, Asia, Venus is in Aquarius all day, and I think we should, in general, assume that Venus is in Aquarius all day. And even though in the Americas there is that change this evening, and so I would have said, Pisces, yeah, you don't have to be doing anything, and you can do a lot in your own home, in your own space, because there is a trine aspect between the Moon and Jupiter. So, Jupiter is currently in Gemini. It's retrograde in Gemini. It's been in Gemini since the end of May. It stays in Gemini until this May. And so with Jupiter in Gemini, it's a time when Pisceans are perhaps thinking about what security means. What does stability mean? What does your home mean? How are you going to find the right home for yourself in terms of your existing home? How can you make it perfect, or as good as is possible? And with the Moon making a trine to Jupiter at the beginning of the year, it's a special time, the beginning of the year, with the Moon making a trine to Jupiter. You are thinking perhaps about your home and your family, and what could make things better. And perhaps there are things you would like to do, you're planning on doing, or plans are perhaps developing. They might, to begin with, have a fairly secretive nature. You're not advertising anything, but you just feel that changes could be made, changes are happening, but it all has to be done very quietly, and you don't have to shout about it. In fact, if you do shout about it, it might wreck the very thing you're trying to achieve. But overall, Moon trine Jupiter is a fortunate aspect, and it does allow you to have an increased sense of stability, and also to consider what steps you can take to make your life even more stable as you move into 2025. And those are my forecasts for the 12 signs. And now I want to look at today from the viewpoint of the I Ching. So these are my forecasts. So I have to ask the question, what is Thursday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram we get is hexagram number 9, which is the taming power of the small. And the I Ching says, dense clouds, no rain. I mean, when we say dense clouds, no rain, the I Ching seems to like that phrase, at least the Wilhelm translation. And so when you've got dense clouds, you think there's a lot of things that are possible if you see rain as a good thing. Dense clouds, it seems that something is happening, but actually it's too early. And we have to be modest with the taming power of the small. It's not a time for doing anything dramatic, and it's a situation perhaps where you've got people who don't have a lot of power, and they're trying their hardest to make things happen. And that might be us. We have not as much power as we'd like, perhaps, and we still feel that we've got to get going on things. We've got to get things moving. And we're being told, just hold back. You haven't got the power to achieve what you're trying to achieve right now. If you want to make any advances, you've got to assume that they're very slow. And so perhaps it's just a time to just resize your expectations. Of course, it resize them in a very downwards manner. So take it easy. And, if you do try to make progress today, if you try to advance, it's very likely that you will very soon hit an obstacle. And, when you do hit an obstacle, the I Ching is quite clear that it's saying, well, you just retreat. There's no dishonor in retreating. It's absolutely the right thing to do. And if we keep moving, we still have to retreat. We can retreat in two possible ways. One way of retreating is we can consciously make the decision we have gone too far and we need to go back. Or if we don't want to retreat, we're going to be forced to retreat anyway. It will happen. So that underlines the point with the taming power of the small, that it's just important to really be modest, not really expect much. And if you try to do anything, there's a real danger that absolutely nothing happens. But I don't even think it's a danger. It's not that anything bad is going to happen. It's just that we're going to be forced to go back. We can go back of our own will, or we can be forced to go back, but it all comes to the same thing. Now, we have two moving lines. The bottom line moves, and the second from the bottom line moves. And because of that, we move to a different hexagram. And the hexagram we move to is hexagram 53, which is development. So it's a kind of a better hexagram, and it's suggesting that looking at the day in general, we try to make progress. We don't succeed. We're forced to go back, and then we look at the situation again, and now it's development, and it's gradual development. The Wilhelm translation makes this clear. We have to take things very slowly. So yes, in the end, we can start to advance. We can push forward with our agenda, but first of all, we have to realize that our ambitions were too lofty. We have to take it really, really slowly, almost in a way that is hardly seen. We slowly move towards whatever we're trying to achieve. And, it's a fortunate hexagram, 53. We do move towards our goal. We're not going to reach our goal, I don't think. But in the end, I think we're going to make satisfactory progress. It may not be dramatic, but it's good enough, and we should be pleased with the results, whatever they might be. And now I want to consider the astrology. So before looking at the horoscope of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, I wanted to consider this tragedy in New Orleans. I don't really know much about the story, but I was just looking at the news before I made this video, and I just did see this event where a truck crashed into a crowd. I think the man had guns. 10 people were killed, 30-something people were injured, and of course it's New Year's Day, so early hours, so it would have been, I suppose there would have been a lot of people on the streets. And I just very quickly wanted to look at the chart of this event. So here's the chart. I got 3:15. I looked at Wikipedia and also the BBC, and they said 3:15. And you can see straight away the position of the planet Uranus. Uranus is on the 7th house cusp. So Uranus in the 7th, Uranus angular is always a time, or not always, but it's very often a time when accidents, earthquakes, attacks can happen. I mean, it's a very consistent feature, and I suppose it describes the event perfectly. Someone from outside attacks. It's dramatic. It's of an earthquake-like nature, and there's our Uranus. Uranus on the IC, Uranus on the descendant, and really, that's it. I mean, you could point out that Venus is on the IC. I mean, Venus on the IC, you would not have associated Venus on the IC with an attack, but maybe when you got Venus on the IC and Uranus on the descendant at the same time, it's a time of power, and that happened at 3:15 a.m. And so perhaps that Venus on the IC did say something about the attack, and because it happened at the same time as Uranus was on the descendant. Now, one way of looking at this attack is to consider the prenatal lunation. Was there any warning given by the prenatal lunation? And of course there was a new moon a couple of days before on December the 30th. So if we set that new moon for if we set the new moon for New Orleans, Saturn is on the midheaven, and Saturn's on the midheaven, Jupiter's square the midheaven, and I mean Mercury is vaguely squared. I mean, I'm not saying that new moon is especially dramatic. I don't think we could say Saturn on the midheaven is going to talk about an accident like that in a direct way. I mean, it's not Uranus on the midheaven. I mean, okay, Neptune is kind of close to that, but a lot of places in America will have Saturn on the midheaven. I mean, let's just illustrate the point by looking at. Let's look at a map of Louisiana, so if we have a map of Louisiana, I believe my geography of this part of the world is fairly minimal, but I think that. I think this is Louisiana, I think, and so you can see that Saturn is on the midheaven right through the state. Okay, see there's New Orleans. Let me just move this over to make sure you can see it. You see, there's New Orleans here, and this is the Saturn on the midheaven line. But the thing is, this Saturn on the midheaven line goes, right through the United States. So there are going to be loads of places in the United States which would have had Saturn on the midheaven at the time of this new moon. And so why Louisiana? I suppose one would have to look at other things. One might look at the horoscope of Louisiana, perhaps, but I didn't have the time to really do that. But we can certainly find some astrological link in terms of what happened in terms of a prenatal new moon plus the actual event which had Uranus on the descendant. So what I want to do now is quickly look at AOC's chart. So AOC has been in the news a lot. I mean, she's always in the news. I mean, she's quite good at being in the news. And she gets a lot of adverse publicity. I mean, in terms of my description of AOC, I'm going to be completely neutral. I'm not. I don't feel any great negativity towards AOC. I'll be honest. I felt huge negativity towards Kamala Harris when I was looking at her chart a few months ago. I don't feel that kind of negativity to AOC. I don't think I agree with her about many things, but still I wanted to look at her chart, and I think I can look at it in a fairly sort of neutral kind of way. And AOC, I do think that is someone who should not be underestimated, and I think that she does have a strong chart. And there are links actually between her and Kamala Harris, and there is what I find interesting is that Kamala Harris and AOC both had the moon in Aries and the sun in Libra. And I regarded, this sort of full moon, because AOC was born just before a full moon. Kamala Harris was born exactly on a full moon, and so with Kamala Harris, her full moon was absolutely exact, and I think the problem with Kamala Harris was that full moon was so exact, it just short-circuited her. She was not someone who was able to express her personality. In a female chart with Sun in Libra, Moon in Aries, you would have expected an effective woman to really start to tune into her Moon in Aries, and that was something that Kamala Harris never really did. I think there was something really overwhelming her, represented by that Sun in Libra. Maybe it says something about her parents. I don't know, because the Sun and the Moon are quite parental, mother, father, whatever. And it was too exact. And so she was still kind of halfway between Aries, Libra. She wasn't really expressing that moon in Aries. I think that you got the impression, looking at the presidential campaign, that she was being controlled by other people. She was terrified of expressing her own opinions. She couldn't work off the cuff. And I think that she just couldn't be herself. I think that she was fitting herself into someone else's image, which was... so her moon in Aries was never really able to show itself in the campaign. Now, with AOC, it's a different picture. I would have said, from what I can see of AOC, regardless of what you think of her opinions, she is very clear about what she thinks and what she believes in. And that would be her moon in Aries. And so maybe from a sort of a developmental perspective, she started off as being like Sun in Libra, and as far as I'm concerned, this is how it works, or it should work, that in a female chart, as a child, it's more of a Sun, but as the girl gets older, matures, the moon starts to take precedence. And so with AOC, her moon in Aries does seem to have taken precedence, and she is able to be moon in Aries, being quite impulsive. She says what's on her mind. She sometimes gets herself into trouble, and the moon is very communicative, and I suppose the moon, you could say, it communicates from the heart, because it's but also she's got Mercury opposition moon. She's got Mercury on the midheaven. So Mercury on the midheaven opposition moon in Aries is clearly someone who has a lot to say. Remember, Mercury is sort of mental communication. Moon is more sort of emotional communication that sort of perhaps comes from her heart, from her past experiences. It sounds like with Donald Trump. I think Donald Trump communicates through his moon in Sagittarius rather than his Mercury in Cancer. But she has Mercury on that moon Mercury opposition on the midheaven. I would have said that she manifests that really, really powerfully, and I think that's very much a part of who she is. Now, I think it is easy to underestimate AOC. Perhaps because she just seems to be too progressive, and she's saying things which are going to alienate parts of the electorate. Not her own voters, her voters in New York, in her congressional district number 14. They vote for her. She's voted both in the primaries and in the general election. She overwhelmingly gets voted in, and of course, as a congresswoman, she has to have an election. She has to face the electors every 2 years, and so she. I believe is a woman who has a keen sense of self-interest, and I think that this is perhaps reflected by her Mars and her Saturn. And using Placidus houses, I know whole sign houses would show you something different, but using Placidus houses, she's got Saturn in Capricorn in the first house. So Saturn in Capricorn is an aspect which... Saturn in Capricorn is a placement which is in the first house, is serious, is focused, someone who is able to look after her own interests, Saturn in its own sign in Capricorn. And then she's got Mars on the midheaven. Mars is in Libra. Mars supposedly is in its detriment in Libra. I mean, it's a very over-the-top Mars. I mean, Mars is it's a masculine planet. It's in a masculine sign. It's above the horizon. I mean, ideally, Mars would probably be sort of below the horizon because it's a nocturnal planet. But because it's above the horizon, it's a very dramatic Mars. I don't see any evidence necessarily that she's projecting that Mars. I mean, she may be, but she seems to have a fair amount of ownership of that Mars. But what's important about that Mars, the fact she's got the malefics, Mars in the 10th, Saturn in the 1st, using Placidus. But those two planets, Mars and Saturn, are in mutual reception with each other, mutual reception by exaltation. So Mars is in Libra, which is the exaltation of Saturn. Saturn is in Capricorn, which is the exaltation of Mars. So the fact that she's got Mars and Saturn in the 10th, Mars in the 10th, Saturn in the 1st, in mutual reception by exaltation, suggests that she knows how to look after herself, and she has a keen sense of her own ambitions. And she's not going to self-destruct by necessarily sticking to one particular policy. And it was sort of noticed shortly after the election, I think maybe even immediately after the election, but on her Twitter X feed, she dropped her pronouns. She made it clear what her pronouns were, but then she removed them. And maybe this is a sign of someone who is understanding the demands of the times, and I think that that would make sense. So I would have expected AOC to be a career politician. I mean, she's already a career politician, but I mean, I think I have this feeling that she will adjust her position in terms of what is expedient at a particular time. And I think what is really interesting with AOC, especially in terms of what she did with her pronouns and her trying to understand what's going on. I mean, she made this video asking this question: why is it that people voted for her in the election, but they voted for but at the same time on the ballot they voted for her, but they also voted for Trump? And she found this rather confusing, but she's engaging with that, and she's got Saturn and Neptune problems. You can see this is coming up, and Saturn is about, as we know, Saturn is about to go into Aries. Neptune is about to go into Aries. And so, in other words, Saturn and Aries are going to be hitting her moon. Saturn and Neptune are about to hit her moon. And so her moon Mercury opposition is about to get really hammered by Saturn and Neptune going into Aries. So I've already sort of considered what it actually means for Saturn and Neptune going into Aries. As far as I'm concerned, Saturn and Neptune moving through Pisces was arguably about peak woke. I mean, we don't hear this word woke anymore, but I saw Saturn and Neptune moving into Aries as the end of woke. All this obsession with diversity, and you've looked at since the election, so many American companies are dropping their diversity policies, and that's so Pisces, isn't it? But now things are moving into Aries. Things are certainly changing, and you can see how traumatic this is perhaps going to be for AOC. I mean, at least in a political sense. I mean, the moon represents. I know it's a natal chart, but in mundane charts, the moon is often seen as the people. But the moon might be her electors, and I'm seeing her chart as a mundane chart as well. So with Saturn and Neptune moving into Aries, hitting her moon, that does perhaps represent something of a crisis for her. Now, it may say something about her own personal life, and I don't know, what she wants to do. Whether she's maybe, how old is she? She's 35, so maybe she wants a family. All this kind of stuff. That might be how Saturn and Neptune crossing her IC works, and then so it could work in a very personal way. But I think we're looking at AOC as a public figure, and so I think how she manages Saturn and Neptune moving into Aries is probably going to be very important for her political career. And I do think that her political career, while I think in a longer term sense, I think that she is very focused. I think that Saturn in the first, Mars in the 10th is a really powerful significator of someone who can be successful in politics. I think in the shorter term, over the next couple of years, she does have a few issues here coming up. And of course, we've already had perhaps her first defeat, where she ran against Gerry Connolly, who is a 74-year-old congressman from Virginia, who I think is recovering from cancer. I can't pronounce it, esophageal cancer, but he's recovering from it. And so they were fighting to be elected to be the ranking member of the House Oversight Committee, and apparently this is a very important committee in the House of Representatives. And I think a week ago she was overwhelmingly defeated. So I thought I would quickly look at Gerry Connolly's chart, the man who defeated her, and he is he's an Aries, so his sun is going to be pretty close to relatively close to her moon, and so just do a quick synastry of the two. I'm not saying that there is anything necessarily dramatic here, but you can see the generational difference between AOC and Gerry Connolly. So Gerry Connolly was born, he was born in 1950, 89. So he was born 39 years before she was. And you can see the generational difference between the two. There's AOC's Uranus at 1 degree 49 Capricorn, and Gerry Connolly's Uranus was at 1/8 Cancer. So you can see a complete generational clash between the two. And his Uranus at 1 degree 8 Cancer was square her moon and square her Mercury. So I think that when we look at Gerry Connolly, this congressman from Virginia, we perhaps shouldn't see him necessarily as an individual. We should see him as being representative of an older generation. I mean, he's 74 years old, and his Uranus, this generational planet, is and he's got Mars-Uranus as well. So his Mars-Uranus square there. His Uranus is square AOC's Mercury, square her moon, and opposition her Mercury. In other words, that's triggering AOC's T-square. So let's just go back to AOC's chart to remind ourselves of that T-square. There's her T-square. She's got Moon, Mercury opposition, and Uranus on the T. So again, she really knows how to express herself, and the way she expresses herself is I don't know about powerful is the right word, but she certainly gets attention. And that T-square, when you have a T-square, always look at the empty part of that T-square, the part of the chart that would form the Grand Cross. And of course, there is Gerry Connolly's Uranus at 1 degree Cancer. hitting her Uranus, squaring her Mercury, squaring her Moon. And I would have said, from her perspective, on one level she's seeing generational kickback in terms of who she is. And so she might see how come this man who's 39 years older from her was able to thwart her ambition. That might be the negative way of looking at it. But another way of looking at it would be to say, well, this is something she needs to integrate if she wants to be a successful politician. I mean, I know she's already pretty successful, but to be really successful, she needs to perhaps go a little bit further. But I do think that the next couple of years are going to be tough for her because, well, for a start, she's got Saturn and Neptune hitting her Moon Mercury opposition and hitting her IC. So I think she should not take it for granted that she is going to win, for example, the next primary. I mean, I'm not saying she's going to lose, but it's something she has to be aware of. I mean, by the way, here is what I think is the date for the next primary. It's either, I think at the end of June, New York has its primaries. So the way the system works is you firstly have a primary amongst the Democrats. Will have an election among themselves to see who goes forward to the general election, and she's probably going to be more vulnerable in the primary from the general election. I mean, she's always going to win in a general election if she's the Democrat candidate in New York, but it may be that another Democrat candidate could knock her off her pedestal, could knock her off the ticket. I mean, as she did to her predecessor. She beat her Democratic predecessor in the primaries. I can't remember offhand what year that was. And so this is the New York primary, the next New York primary that AOC is going to have to face. And again, I'm not saying that this is going to be a time where I'm not saying she's going to lose. By the time of that primary, Saturn will be off her Moon, but still Neptune. The sun is going to be square her Mercury, and the sun is going to be her Moon, as it always will be if a primary is in late June. That's true. But this time round, there's going to be Neptune conjunct her Moon and Neptune opposition her Mercury. So she has to be careful, and I'm not making any predictions yet about whether or not she's going to win that primary. But it just may be that if she is completely out of sync with Saturn and Neptune moving into Aries, and if she stays in her old way of being and doesn't move with the times, then some other Democrat candidate could come along and she could lose the primary. But though there is some evidence, for example, with her dropping her pronouns right after the election, that she's kind of aware that something is changing. And I want to finish by looking at her Vedic chart. So there are a couple of things to point out in terms of her Vedic chart. So here is her Vedic chart, and so in terms of the Vedic chart, she is in her Venus Dasha, so in other words, a period of life ruled by Venus, and this started in December 2023, just before the election campaign. And her Venus, is quite well placed, you could say. I mean, it's rising. I mean, she in her Western chart, her Venus is kind of in the 12th house, but in Sagittarius. But in her Vedic chart, Vedic chart, Venus is in the ascendant. So that's a nice thing to have. And her Venus is quite strong. If you look at the Shadbala, the sixfold strength, her Venus looks pretty good. So that's what she's in, and in her Navamsha chart, Venus is in Libra in the 10th house. So again, that might be a sign of political success. But there are a few issues going on. Firstly, so she's 35, and so she turned 35 her last birthday, And so that means her next birthday she's going to turn 36. And so 36 in Vedic astrology can be an important birthday. It represents the year once Saturn matures, when one is 36. And so when one Saturn shows its full strength, and it can be difficult. Princess Diana, Marilyn Monroe, they both died at 36. I'm certainly not saying AOC is going to die. I'm just saying that it could be a challenging time for her turning 36. But perhaps most importantly, she has got Saturn issues in terms of she's got Sadi Sati. So Sadi Sati is when Saturn makes a conjunction to your moon, and the conjunction means being conjunct the whole sign. So if here is AOC's moon, and it was in Aries Western horoscope, but it's in Pisces in Pisces in the Vedic horoscope. Currently, Saturn is in the Vedic zodiac. Saturn is in Aquarius. So her Sadi Sati period has already started. And so it's these 7 years potentially of bad luck. Now, we all have Sadi Sati lasting for 7 years. It's not just her. So it does mean that quarter of our lives we have Sadi Sati. So in itself, that's not that unusual. But given that we know, at least as far as I can see, her situation now is getting a bit tenuous. We're getting, the squad is under attack. And with Saturn and Neptune about to move into Aries, when all this diversity stuff and all this wokeness and all that is going to basically be forgotten. And we're going to be into far more sort of serious issues, perhaps relating to the economy and all of it. Yeah, it's going to go with Saturn moving, I believe, with Saturn and Neptune moving into Aries. So she's going to be under pressure, and she's going to have to redefine herself. And so it's going to be difficult for her to redefine herself. Now, her Sadi Sati period has already, as I said, has already started, and it started. So it started. Let's see. It started when Saturn went into sidereal Aquarius. So Saturn went into sidereal Aquarius in April 2022. So she kind of weathered that storm. But the immediate and central period of Sadi Sati is when Saturn is in the same sign as the moon, and so that starts on that starts on March the 29th, 2025, and goes through until on and off until February 2028. But so end of March 2025 is when Saturn moves into the same sign as her moon, and of course, soon after that, in terms of sort of Western astrology, she will have Saturn crossing her moon. So she is under a lot of pressure here, I would have said, and I think she's about to be under a lot of pressure. And I think in terms of her chart, what I think will happen, I don't think even if she loses her congressional seat in 2026, well, I think she probably will if she doesn't adjust to the changing situation, to Saturn and Neptune moving into Aries. However, I would have guessed that with that Saturn with her Saturn in Capricorn in the first house and her Mars in Libra in the 10th, and those two in mutual reception by exaltation, I think she'll know where her best interests lie. And so I think we could expect over the next couple of years some change in AOC. And if she doesn't change, I think, particularly with her Sadi Sati, this Sadi Sati might encourage her to mess things up it is a time where her luck is declining, and certainly from the end of March onwards, she has to be very careful in terms of what she's doing politically. And one other point about AOC is she's born on a Jupiter-Saturn opposition. So she was born October the 13th, 1989. There's Jupiter in Cancer opposition Saturn in Capricorn, a fairly close Jupiter-Saturn opposition. Now, so at the end of this decade, there's a Jupiter-Saturn opposition, and I think that this Jupiter-Saturn opposition is going to change everything. I think that overall we're going to see, perhaps there's going to be a wobble this year, but I think perhaps at the beginning of this year, but I think we're going to see, in the end, some kind of economic boom under Trump. And that might persist until the following term. I think if Vance, for example, takes over from Trump. But 2029, 2030, things in America are going to go wrong. I suspect badly wrong economically. And so AOC has this Jupiter-Saturn opposition, and then maybe that's her moment when she's actually going to be aligned with the times. I think she's not aligned with the times perhaps at the moment, but she perhaps has to just hang out in politics until the end of the decade when she will align. And I think that I know at the moment the right is feeling exultant having won this election. It's all about capitalism and free enterprise, and everyone hates the concept of intervention. But by the end of the decade, things will change, I think, and people will be looking at the government as perhaps being a saviour. Now, that sounds completely impossible at the moment, but you wait until the end of the decade, and it might be at that time where AOC really is able to really start to make an impact politically. So don't write her off, and I don't think she's going away. Anyway, that's all I'm going to say for today. I hope you found this video of some interest. If you enjoyed this video, I would be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. And if you want to buy me a coffee, there is a link in the description. So thanks again for watching, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.